There is a version of the avoidant that only exists in the presence of someone who loves them. A version that is warmer, slightly more present, capable of gestures that resemble emotional investment. When your love disappears, not gradually, not ambiguously, but completely, that version ceases to exist. What remains is a person stripped of the one external force that was quietly organizing their capacity for connection, and what they become in that absence reveals everything they were hiding. Number 1, they become rigidly, suffocatingly themselves. Love from another person creates a gentle pressure on the avoidant's defenses, not enough to break them, but enough to shape their behavior into something slightly more relational, slightly more human, slightly more capable of existing alongside another consciousness without complete shutdown. Your love was the gravitational field that kept their most extreme tendencies in orbit. Without it, those tendencies achieved terminal velocity. The emotional withdrawal that was once strategic becomes total. The self-sufficiency that was once performed becomes the only mode of existence they can access. The walls that existed before you solidify into permanent architecture rather than defensive positioning. They don't become more avoidant. They become purely avoidant without the softening influence of someone whose love occasionally pulled them toward vulnerability. What you see after your love ends is the unedited version of who they were always fighting to remain. Subscribe to understand the psychology of who people become when external love stops organizing their behavior. Number 2, they become someone who mistakes numbness for healing. The avoidant interprets the absence of acute grief as evidence of emotional health. When your love disappears, they notice the relief before they notice the loss, and they misread this sequencing as proof that they're psychologically well-adjusted, that they didn't need the relationship the way you did, that their detachment was wisdom rather than defense. They reconstruct their identity around this perceived equanimity, presenting themselves as someone who processes loss cleanly, who doesn't spiral, who moves forward without the messy emotional residue that plagues more attached people. What they cannot see is that the numbness they're performing as peace is the same numbness that prevented them from fully inhabiting the relationship while it existed. They become someone who confuses the absence of feeling for the presence of strength. Building an identity on emotional flatness, they mistake for groundedness. The grief doesn't disappear. It calcifies beneath the composure, hardening their psychology further against the next person who tries to love them. Number 3, they become the architect of a story where love was never the point. Without your love to contradict it, the avoidance narrative about relationships reorganizes itself into something self-protective and airtight. Love becomes reframed as a distraction they briefly entertained. Connection becomes something they tried and found overrated. The relationship becomes evidence that intimacy offers nothing worth the vulnerability required to sustain it. They construct a version of themselves that never truly needed the love they lost. Someone who was always more interested in independence than in the warmth of another person's consistent presence. This story requires constant maintenance because it contradicts the truth that lives beneath it. That they wanted to be loved beyond their capacity to receive it. That they wanted to stay beyond their capacity to remain. That they wanted to be the person your love briefly made them feel like they could become. Who they become when you stop loving them is the person who spends the rest of their life perfecting the lie that they never needed you to begin with. When your love ends, the avoidant doesn't become free. They become the permanent, uninterrupted version of the loneliness they spent every relationship trying to outrun.